Welcome, everyone, to What It Takes, and thank you for your patience. I'm Emily Kirsch, founder and CEO of Powerhouse, founder and managing partner of Powerhouse Ventures, and I'm so happy to have Matt Duesterberg, co-founder and CRO of OhmConnect, here with us today on What It Takes. I want to let you all know that we've enabled the chat so that you can post your favorite quotes as you hear them. Feel free to say hello as we are just kicking off the interview. We're really happy to have our friends at East Bay Community Energy as the sponsor of this live recording of What It Takes. OhmConnect actually works with EBCE to raise awareness of times of peak demand among EBCE customers. So Matt, before we officially start the interview, wanted to see if you have anything to say about your work with EBCE.
Yeah, we've loved working with East Bay Community Energy. They have been working with us and breaking new ground in a lot of ways. One of the first RA contracts between third parties and an LSE was through our contract with East Bay. And then we're also trying to raise awareness, as Emily has talked about, by gathering a lot more East Bay Community Energy customers onto the OhmConnect platform. So super excited working with Nick and looking forward to expanding that relationship.
Awesome. Very happy to hear it. It is now my pleasure to introduce EBCE CEO and friend of Powerhouse, Nick Chassett, to the show. Nick, welcome.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you, Matt. I just want to, once again say how happy we are at East Bay to partner with Powerhouse to share these stories of clean energy entrepreneurship and shine a light on the energy transition. And so we're really proud of our partnership, in particular with Ohm, and look forward to continuing to deliver clean energy with them and so many other partners. So thank you.
Of course. Thank you, Nick. I like the shirt. We'll see you soon. All right. So welcome again to What It Takes and to Powerhouse. It's an honor to have OhmConnect's co-founder and CRO, Matt Duesterberg, with us today. Matt, officially, welcome to What It Takes.
Thank you, Emily. So good to see you again.
You too. You too. So, Matt, you are our second guest on What It Takes in a row to have grown up in Atlanta. You grew up there with your older brother and two parents who were both entrepreneurs. You describe yourself as both being introverted and extroverted and spent a lot of your time in your early years reading books. Tell me a little bit about your parents and about your upbringing.
Yeah, my parents were entrepreneurs as well. They started a company called Business Software House, which is a totally original name, but they were basically in the business of doing software and they were working out of their house. And some of that entrepreneurship rubbed off on me. I remember, well, I actually don't remember it. It was a story that's been related to me a number of times. When I was 6 or 7, apparently I woke up one Saturday morning at like 7 a.m. and wheeled out like a folding table to the front yard and set up basically a carnival game where people could shoot darts and pay me $1 to shoot 10 darts at different targets that I set up. And so that was my first foray into entrepreneurship.
Love it. So yeah, you mentioned your parents started this company together, but after 13 years of working together, your mom decided to leave the company to save their marriage, and she started a retail consignment shop that you helped her build out and helped her run in high school. What did you learn about entrepreneurship from your parents?
That it was hard, that it is a tough road ahead, but that if you're dedicated and you continue at it and you have a clear goal in mind, you can achieve it.
That's good. Good entrepreneurship lessons. Your older brother attended University of Virginia to study chemical engineering, and you followed him there, choosing the same major and graduated with a BS in chemical engineering in 2006. What was your college experience like, and how did you plan to use your chemical engineering degree?
Yeah, chemical engineering was really, of course, I followed my brother in that direction, but at the time, there was a lot of discussion about hydrogen economy and how to get clean energy through the hydrogen economy. So I went to chemical engineering through that pathway, um, much to find 4 years later when I graduated that that was a far off idea. Now it's rearing its head again, which is great, but I missed that window.
Gotcha. How did you come to first care about climate? Were there any influential books or moments in your life in high school or undergrad?
Yeah, there's really two events that happened at UVA when I was there. One was a book that I read. It was Collapse by Jared Diamond. and really talked about what could happen to societies, even thriving societies, that end them. A terminus point, for example. And the one kind of story that really stuck out with me was Easter Island. They were a thriving economy. They were building those stone statues that you've heard about on Easter Island. Maybe people have seen it. Um, but at some point, somebody chopped down the last tree in Easter Island, and that put them in a place where they could not exist forever. And so that was really scary. The second piece that really woke me up to climate change was one of my final exams as a senior. And the professor asked, can you build the energy balance? What is the entire energy portfolio of the world by 2040? And it gave us a couple of constraints like carbon and economy. And the problem was unsolvable. And at that point, every problem I had seen to date through high school, through college, you could always solve. This problem, I was like, I literally can't solve it. It was super frustrating. I went to the professor. I was like, I don't know if this is solvable. And he was like, it's not. And it was a wake up call. I was like, we need to do something different.
Makes sense. Immediately following you graduating from University of Virginia, you went to work as an associate at DC Energy, where you were seeking to model where electricity would flow to beat the market. More specifically, you were trading electricity derivatives on recently deregulated energy markets and looking for ways to more accurately predict usage in congested areas to reduce price fluctuations. You were exposed to massive amounts of capital. You were personally trading about 30 to $40 million a year when you were just 2 years out of college. What did you learn from your time at DC Energy?
Well, it was my first real job out of college, so I didn't know how weird that was at the time. But what I really learned was that there was a massive amount of efficiency that could be created by these deregulated markets. We were basically pitted against incumbents that had very archaic ways of modeling the world. And DC Energy came in with some sophisticated financial models, even run by a 22, 23-year-old, was able to outperform kind of their models. And so it was a big learning in that there was a lot of improvements that could be made by disrupting the incumbents.
Mm-hmm. So you took that experience and decided to leave DC Energy in 2009 to earn a master's in mechanical engineering from Stanford University, which I want to note you completed your master's in just 9 months for the purpose of saving money. Which very much ties back to your parents' entrepreneurial experience and influence on you. You shared that you got your master's from Stanford mostly for the name, but you didn't really gain any technical value to help you be a better entrepreneur. And so I'm curious, for investors like us or for people who are hiring, what do you think we should know based on your grad school experience?
I think there is a lot of ways to look at potential candidates or ways to look at your career going forward that is beyond the name and the brand recognition of these big name schools. And that is going to be a big challenge, especially for my kids' generation. When they decide where to go to school, are they going to go to those top tier universities, or is there just not going to be enough room because the globalization and kind of flattening of the world? And so that's a big question. One thing I did learn from Stanford, that said, is humility.
Mm.
I was able to breeze through, I think, a little bit in high school and college, but at Stanford, I just was, I got to a couple of classes and I just didn't know how to solve them. And it was really kind of eye opening that there was people there that were like, oh, I could figure this out. And I was definitely not one of them.
Sounds like a good humbling experience. Following Stanford, you joined a startup called Raker, a utility meter analysis company that provided insights into consumers through smart meters, and you led the data analytics team to create new statistical methods for identifying business opportunities for your utility clients. And you were one of the first people, and Raker was one of the first companies in the country to have access to data from millions of people via smart meters. You were employee number 13, and in 2013, when you were about 26 years old, Raker was acquired by Oracle when the team was just about 30 people. As part of the acquisition, you became Oracle's very first data scientist in 2013. So first, how did Oracle not have a data scientist prior to
It,
2013?
well, remember back in 2013, data science was just the cutting edge, or kind of, and Oracle wasn't exactly on the cutting edge at the time. So I remember they asked, would you like job title to be? I was like, oh, just a data scientist. And they were like, oh, we have to make that in our records. And I was like, wow, this is a Silicon Valley company, cutting edge, and we're bringing data science for the first time. It was awesome to be the first one, but as you'll see, like I didn't stay there very long because of that experience and some others.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, tell me about what was your experience at Data Raker like? What did you learn?
Yeah, Data Raker was amazing in a different way than DC Energy, in that I was exposed to, as you said, millions of records of smart meter data. And it had a tremendous data. There's so much power in that data. But the request that we had, the relationship we had with the utilities, was just to say, are these meters working or not? So it's kind of the bare bones question, like, is it on or not off? And
That's all they
apparently
wanted to know, the
that's
utilities.
that's all they wanted to know. And it was on one hand really cool to be able to access and see all that data, but it was incredibly frustrating because we saw a ton of analytics you could do beyond just, is it binary working or not, um, that we wanted to share, but the utilities were not ready to receive that type of information.
Hmm. Yeah, I can imagine that was frustrating.
Yep.
um, Back at Stanford is when you met your wife, Van. How did your relationship start? And then how did the Data Raker exit impact your relationship?
Yeah, we met through friends and fell in love within a couple of months. It was interesting. I had been through several relationships before, but she was the one, and I kind of knew right away. Um, when Data Raker exited, me and Van weren't yet married or even engaged at that point. But we had a long discussion of like, where could we use the money from this? And was it to really settle down and have a family and buy a house? Or could we plow it really into our careers? And we opted into the latter. And Van was incredibly supportive. OhmConnect would not exist if it hadn't been for her foresight to say, look, let's do what makes us happy,
Hmm.
as opposed to like settling down at this moment.
Hmm. We'll double click on that later. But prior to that, in 2013, you became CTO of KWH Analytics, a solar analytics company working to reduce the soft costs in solar. At the time, KWH Analytics was based in Powerhouse's very first office in Jack London Square in Oakland, California. But you were only CTO of KWH Analytics for 5 months. Why did you leave?
Yeah, I had a brief stint with Rich. We ended up. I wanted to be much more of a founder type role at KWH, and Rich had already been doing it for multiple years, and rightfully so. He wanted to have a lot of ownership, and so we decided to split ways. And I think at the end it worked out really well because he's still doing extremely well. KWH is really recreating the solar financing. And then I was able to build OhmConnect with a couple other co-founders that hopefully will revolutionize and empower more solar on the grid.
Yep, agreed. So today, fast forward, you are the Chief Revenue Officer of OhmConnect, the leader in residential demand response. OhmConnect pays users like me and many of you listening to save energy during peak hours on the grid. I know you all reduced a gigawatt of electricity demand in California during last August's heat wave. And following a recent $100 million investment from Google's Sidewalk Infrastructure Partners, which included 20 million in equity and then 80 million to develop a demand response program, OhmConnect's plans to build out a 550 megawatt virtual power plant made up of hundreds of thousands of households across the state. For people who are learning about OhmConnect for the first time here on What It Takes, how would you describe what OhmConnect does?
Well, first of all, that's just unit one. We want to build 1.8 gigawatts
Nice.
of electricity. That would be the largest power plant in
Mm.
California. Um, but back to your question, what is OhmConnect? Why do we build it? It really is a pathway to empower people, homeowners, residences, renters, to actually access the energy markets that I saw when I was at DC Energy.
Mm.
When I was trading at DC Energy, we were trading, multi-million dollar portfolios. Yet, and it was really, I was focused in New York, and I would be in New York with some of my friends, and they would literally have their ACs open or ACs on with the windows open.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, we're earning a lot of money off you doing that. You shouldn't be doing that, but it's good for DC Energy.
Yeah.
And it was kind of, there was no connection back to the individual residents. And so the idea was, let's democratize that. Instead of
Mm,
having a financial entity being able to participate in these markets, why couldn't you, as a homeowner, as an individual, participate in these markets? And that's really kind of the underlying thesis behind OhmConnect.
mm. I know the initial idea for OhmConnect started in 2013 when you participated in Powerhouse's one of our very first hackathons, and your team won a whopping $1,000 for the idea and for some initial programming. You and your friend turned co-founder Curtis Tung came to the hackathon with the goal of aligning solar production with energy usage. So essentially embracing the concept that electricity should be used when the sun is shining, to your previous point. How did you know, or did you know that what you were building at the Powerhouse Hackathon in 2013 would become what OhmConnect is today?
I think it was beyond our kind of wildest dreams. We wanted to make a difference, and we are, looking back at that time, I would be so proud of what we've done. But now, at this point, I want to do a lot more because,
Mhm.
it's just one element in kind of revolutionizing the clean energy grid.
Mm,
Um, but I think the biggest part of that hackathon is kind of the recognition of how much you can do in just a short amount of time. We were the quote unquote 9 to 5ers. We only went from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. really with an intention that we were going to be doing this for the next 7 years.
mm,
At the time, I didn't know it was going to be 7 years, but ingraining a culture of stability and sustainability with me and Kurt being able to sleep at night instead of working through the night.
mm. Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like you were approaching it like the marathon that it has become and will continue to be in the most positive way. You've said that every startup has a secret. What's Ohm Connect's secret? And has that secret changed from that weekend at the hackathon to today, or has it stayed the same?
It has basically stayed the same with slight kind of refining around the edges, if you will. The secret, the underlying secret that I think we have is that the only pathway to get to 100% clean energy, which is primarily wind and solar is 100% clean energy, is having resources that can firm the grid to allow us to use more electricity when the sun is shining and the wind is blowing, and not to be blacked out when the sun is not shining, like we saw in August this past year in California. And really, that secret leads to really two types of resources. One is batteries and storage, which there's been a lot of focus on. The second one that I see is kind of being more intelligent about how we use electricity and really leveraging the technologies that everyone's phone has. A lot of this is already ingrained in people's houses, and let's just tap into it.
Hmm, makes sense. Um, Following Powerhouse's hackathon and your big win, in true Silicon Valley fashion, you and your co founder, Curtis, set up a shop in what was basically a broom closet of an office in San Francisco to continue to work on OhmConnect. You're now president and CTO, Kadir Lee, joined about a year and a half later to help refine the idea. What made you and Curtis take the leap to embrace OhmConnect as what you were going to pursue full time? Like, how did you basically decide to become an entrepreneur, become a founder?
Yeah, both of us were very aligned in the idea that we kind of knew that there was a pathway to solve our basic needs: food, water, shelter. We've both been, in the working world for 6, 7 years and amassed a significant amount of capital to say, okay, let's do exactly what we want for the world. And Kadir, in a lot of ways, was the same way. He was just several orders of magnitude beyond us with his exit at Zynga. And we were able to say, look, we want to dedicate to the mission of getting to 100% clean energy. And that may take 3 years. I mean, that may take 5 years. And for the first 2 or 3 years at OhmConnect, we made zero revenue. So that dedication was all about the mission and the desire to see that through.
Hmm. Um, you spent about a year and a half working out of the broom closet alongside Curtis and Kadir and maybe one or two others, experience that you described as smelly, before upgrading to an attic and then I think a basement before eventually switching to an all remote setup in June of 2019. How did you go about building the business in the first year? Like, how did you know how to do the foundational startup building that you and Curtis and Kadir did?
We didn't know. It was a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of spaghetti on the wall. I think when Kadir joined, he brought a ton of experience, so we were able to really focus in on a lot of ways. But the pathway in which OhmConnect earns revenue and really represents users on behalf of in the marketplace didn't even exist. And we paved that way through our workings with the California regulatory commissions, through stakeholder engagements, and really spreading the word that this is a resource that we can't leave untapped.
Hmm. Did you get pushback from investors? I feel like so often, if anything requires regulatory approval or some big change in the regulatory environment, investors are like, death nail. How'd you approach that?
Yeah, and I think kind of the most recent investor is shown that that actually is something you can lean into. When you see that regulatory pushback, there is a tremendous amount of disruption value that can happen. That's a barrier to entry, for example. But the initial investors did not see it that way. They were scared as much as we were. And so we got a lot of help and support from people who frankly believed in us and our dedication and the mission. They did something good for the world. I was actually talking to one of our first investors yesterday, and he was like, "Look, I put the money in because I believed you guys were doing something good, and if you didn't make it, hey, that was my shot at trying to change the world."
Hmm.
And a lot of the early investors saw it that way. Thankfully, we're in a place where we are able to return on their investment in a healthy way.
Hmm. Speaking of those investors, and you mentioned earlier that it took about 3 years from 2013 to 2016 before you were generating any revenue, but you were able to raise $1 million from angels and other investors that rolled into a $6 million Series A at the end of 2015 when you were still pre revenue. Around the time you also received a $4 million grant from the California Energy Commission. But that seed slash Series A round included really notable investors. I want to ask you who you were talking to yesterday if you want to share, but your early investors includes the Salesforce founder and CEO, Mark Benioff, co-founder and former CEO of Yahoo, Jerry Yang, founder of Zynga, Mark Pincus, and then former presidential candidate, Tom Steyer. How did you get these investors? That's question one. Question two is what should founders be looking for when they are raising capital? What should founders look for in investors?
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, that was driven by Kadir's joining us. We were able to pull in these big names, but the reason we were able to pull in Kadir, that might be the first question, is we had built a product that was sustainable, that was exactly in line with the thesis he had and how you could change the world. So you go back to the secret, and every startup has this secret. We were very fortunate to have had a secret that there is multiple people, very experienced people recognized as well. And once you see that secret embodied in somebody else, it's a natural alignment. And so once Kadir was able to come on, then he was able to bring on Mark Pincus and then several others. And but to get there, you needed that first round of seed stage funding. So the person I was talking to is actually a DC Energy ex-colleague of mine, and he worked with me for a couple years and just knew who I was. And I think there is this element of if you can prove yourself in the workforce, if you are able to show that you've got sustainability behind you, you might be able to get investment that way.
Really well said. OhmConnect is now 7 years old. Looking back at those 7 years from where you're sitting now, what are the biggest mistakes you've made so far, and what have you learned?
Yeah, I think the company itself has been very aggressive in the regulatory space, and that could be both a positive and a negative. In many ways, we've unlocked a pathway to the market that no one else had before. On the other hand, we've created a lot of enemies, and so
Who are
there's
your enemies?
well, in a lot of ways, incumbents. And I go back to, the oil and gas companies knew about climate change in the 1970s, and they worked to cover it up. I think there's an element that the existing energy, it's $1 trillion energy industry, and people do not want that to change. They do not want young disruptive startups to come and take a big piece of their pie. And so that created a target on our back in a lot of ways.
Hmm. Um, And does that feel like, is that a mistake, or is it just kind of the reality of the environment that you've decided to innovate in?
It's a little bit of a reality of um, the energy space in general, and I think I'll maybe double click a little bit on this. Is that, when you're trying to steer this $1 trillion energy ship, you've got a lot of different influencers. And one of the things that the incumbents have done very good job of is making sure that their laws are protected and the status quo is protected. And as a world, as a society, it is paramount for us, especially as we think about climate change, that we need to change that status quo.
Hmm.
And so there's almost a populist movement that needs to be behind this that says climate change is real. You know, we had administration for the past 4 years saying that that's not the case. And I think the voters have spoken to say, look, we do believe in that. And now that was one of many issues, but it is something that we all need to step up and say, I believe in this. This is important to me. And I'm passionately behind this.
Mm-hmm. In order to do that, I know you mentioned you have to have a sustainable business. You have to build something that can grow and sustain on its own. Just about everyone we've had on What It Takes has at some point in their entrepreneurial journey been within months, weeks, days, or even hours of shutting their doors. Has OhmConnect ever come that close? And what, if so, what was that like?
Oh, it's the Wifio moment. The we're fucked, it's over.
I learned a new acronym. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, we've had those moments. I think the most striking one that's really like seared into my brain was July 24th, 2016. This was a day when we saw the results of an auction that the utilities didn't follow the rules to.
Hmm.
Um, and I didn't know that was possible. You could just not follow rules. It was illegal. And so we worked over the next 3 or 4 months to straighten those rules out. And sure enough, we got a very positive CPUC decision that said, hey, you have to follow these rules. But I think that was a wake up moment of that is the regulatory risk. I had heard from people, it's like, oh, you've got a regulatory risk. It didn't really sink in until that day. And
Hmm.
I remember going on a very long run that day. My wife was pregnant. It was a dark day for me, but we came out stronger on the other side.
Hmm. What did the initial illegal activity that you're speaking to, what did that mean for you all? Like, what was the negative
Yeah,
outcome for OhmConnect?
the overall market size was basically cut in half of what it
Mm,
should have been.
gotcha.
And illegal is a strong word, and I mean you could use it, but it was kind of interpreting rules in different lights. And I think that's a common theme we even see today, where you could look at the same type of rules or regulations or even the same data and find a different interpretation. We see
Mm,
that
mhm,
in news sources today on global issues. And I think one of the areas that I hope that the energy sector will come around to, and I will invoke the words of the Kaiso CEO, Elliot Manzier. And he came away with a perspective of, look, there's a lot to be learned here, and we need to approach it with a spirit of intellectual curiosity instead of pointing fingers.
mm,
And I think that can broadly apply to a lot of where we are in the world today, but we see it on the ground level in the energy sector today.
mm. To your point on that kind of need for humble introspection, as far as your role with OhmConnect over the past 7 years, you were CEO of OhmConnect from the very beginning up until September of 2019, when our mutual friend and longtime industry leader Cisco DeVries joined OhmConnect as CEO. Why did you transition out of being CEO, and how did that come about?
Well, Cisco, so you probably know out of anyone, it wasn't that hard of a decision. But yeah, I mean, for me, it was personally very, very hard. Of course, I mean, it was my baby. I built it, we cultivated it and started building a unit economic positive business out of this. And to hand over the reins is a little scary. But of course, as you know, Cisco and Kadir, senior executives that I can learn a ton from, makes it a really easy decision. They've helped accelerate OhmConnect 4 or 5 years into the future of
Mm,
what I could do, and that
mm,
becomes a no-brainer. the way that me and Kurt, when we first founded OhmConnect, had really focused on is if we can extend the human life for months or years by making a more sustainable lifestyle for the entire planet, let's do it. And I think they certainly bring it from months to years. And that becomes a really easy decision in light of everything else.
Mm-hmm. What advice would you give to founders who, either by choice or not, are bringing in a new CEO into their company?
That's a hard question. I think the the most important thing is really understanding what drives you personally, not what everyone else tells you is important. It's what you actually feel is important, because no matter what other people are going to tell you that it's important, if you don't actually believe it down to the bone, then there will be always friction.
That's really well said. A few weeks ago, California Independent Service Operator, California Public Utility Commission, California Energy Commission released a joint report on the root causes of the 2020 California August blackouts, which you spoke to earlier. Prior to this past August, we hadn't had blackouts in California in about 19 years. What are the most important takeaways from that report, and what's OhmConnect's role in addressing the blackouts that we all faced last year?
Yeah, 19 years ago when it happened, just to put it in context, the governor basically got ousted for kind of the California electricity crisis of California. Several prominent energy executives went to jail, and then they built 40 peaker power plants, natural gas peaker power plants, to solve this problem. That is not an option now. I mean, if we want to get to 100% clean energy, building 40 gas peaker power plants is not the pathway to do so. So the goal, I think, over the next few years to maintain a sustainable grid is really to focus those resources, or the money behind those resources, into resources that are clean, that are flexible, and that are reliable. And that's going to be a challenge for the energy sector. It is something new. We've never experienced this before. When you have such high amount of renewables on the grid.
Mm-hmm. Creating that kind of systems change is big. I'm happy you're taking it on. I'm happy about the recent funding announcement. Maybe at a more both personal and systemic level, I and Powerhouse believes deeply that every one of us listening has a role to play in creating a more equitable energy system. What is OhmConnect's role in building that equitable system?
Yeah, one of the challenges with clean energy, and I worry that this has driven some of the kind of anti-clean energy groups, is that a lot of the benefits that solar and storage and EVs provide are not accessible by low to middle income communities. Often they come with a big upfront price tag, 10,000 or more, and that's not just lying around the house for a lot of these communities. OhmConnect brings a free platform. You can sign up right now. And then often one of the cheapest automated devices you can install install into your home is on the order of $10. And they pay back within 3 months. So you'll make $30 over the course of a year for this $10 plug. And so kind of democratizing that inequity allows us to get more people engaged in the clean energy conversation.
Mm-hmm. Putting together kind of the business, the social impact, and then the personal. On the personal front, you were 32 when you had your first kid. You had put, as you mentioned earlier, the exit capital from Data Raker into OhmConnect rather than buying a house. So you and your wife were living in a studio apartment when you had your first child. And I want to make sure I got this right. So your kid's bed was some kind of storage bin, like a plastic storage bin on a shelf in a closet. And then when you were planning on having your second kid, you told your wife you could just get another bin and put it on another shelf in the closet to stack them. And then at
Yeah,
that
to be
point, she was like,
clear,
it's time to buy a home. Is that right?
yeah, if you've seen like the Japanese beds, they would be separate. You wouldn't just stack it on top so the bottom
Yeah, yeah,
person can
of
get
course.
out.
Of course. No, I mean, you're not an animal.
Exactly. My wife nixed that idea.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think we did what we could. San Francisco is an extremely expensive city, and do what you can to make what we're doing. My wife was also an entrepreneur, and so she's starting her own company. I'm starting my own company, and that was where we focused our expenditures basically.
Yeah.
And our kid was great and hasn't really. She's been able to grow into a bigger place. I have
Bigger
a lot
bed.
more space. It's not a bigger bed, just more space.
Still in the bin. um, on that personal front, you're obviously founder, CRO, a partner to your wife, a parent to your kids. What is it like to be all of those things at once?
It's really hard before COVID. Um, the one silver lining of COVID is that I've been able to spend a lot more time with my children. And it's because I'm not traveling. One of the hopes is that video conferencing, we're able to do this, and it's much more efficient. You're not doing a lot of transit. So I hope that will be one of the futures with, even post COVID.
Mm.
Um, but it's a challenge, and one of the things that I've learned is being present for your kids almost every day is something to really achieve, and it's a goal to be set alongside your goals of company.
Well said. Looking ahead, what does OhmConnect look like in 5 years?
Yeah, we will hopefully be the largest plant provider in California, maybe a couple of other markets, and that will allow solar and wind to become the predominant energy source. By providing that flexible load. There's a lot that needs to get there, but there's a lot of tailwinds behind it. I think the new administration has certainly seen an upshot of not only regulation, but investment and capital as we have more investors seeing the certainty that the clean energy is the future of America.
Hmm. That's a perfect parlay into my last question before the high voltage round, which is what is the future of energy? What does that look like over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I think it should be free. Energy generally should be free or extremely cheap, but it has to be very timely. So you have to be able to use electricity when you want. Now, ideally, you have solutions like OhmConnect that comes in and is able to manage that for you. The other big components that should come in is electrification. So, moving every home to a fully electric home, no gas, and the transportation sector. Gavin Newsom's order to get all electric vehicles on the roads in California is a very important one. And we'll see more and more flexible loads being able to support your car, for example, can support your dishwasher at night or cooking at night. And so that type of beautiful relationship is a very sustainable one.
Hmm. Well, I'm really grateful that OhmConnect is helping to build and create that future, and very happy that you came to our hackathon
Well, thanks
so
for having
many
us.
so many years ago. To close with our high voltage round, so quick questions, like a couple word answers, starting with if you were going to be an animal, what animal would you be and why?
That's a good one. You did prep me for this, but I was not ready. Um, I think it has to be something in flight, a butterfly.
Why? Why butterfly?
Uh, Being able to go wherever you want
Sounds good.
and smell the flowers along the way.
That's lovely. If you had to start a new career tomorrow, what would it be?
In policy space.
Oh, what kind of role?
I would want to have a decision-making capability to make sure that we get to 100% clean energy. Reinforce what Biden has been doing.
I mean, the administration's hiring, so just putting it out there. Other than yourself, to whom do you attribute your success?
My wife, Van, we wouldn't be here without her and her support. During those WIFIO moments, she's the one who kind of pats you on the back. It's like, you'll make it.
When have you failed?
That Stanford final exam was one big failure. I mean, there's a lot of small failures along the way. And I think one of the keys is overcoming the small failures so you don't have a big one.
What's the best investment you've ever made?
OhmConnect.
What's something that you thought was true that you no longer believe?
That information is indisputable. Data is indisputable.
When are you your best self?
With the family
Mm.
right now, when I'm 36. So I don't know what
What's your
that'll be like in the
worst?
future.
What's your worst trait?
My worst trait, not being able to feel for people who aren't kind of in the same direction as me, and that's something that I need to overcome. But I think a
Mm.
lot of us do as well, given where we're at in the world today.
Mm. Mhm. If you could change one thing about the world, what would it be?
1970s, that the oil companies woke up and said, "Hey, climate change is real. We got to probably do something about this."
Love that answer. If there was just one or two people who were going to hear this podcast, who would you want them to be?
Um, Apple, the head of Apple, and you know, the head of Amazon, people that have a lot of money and power and can make a change to create sustainability. Um, and hopefully they will invest.
Okay. Yeah, call me Tim and Jeff. Um, Finish these sentences for me. Companies fail because
Lack of focus.
hmm, if you really knew me, you would know.
Um, uh, I don't know that I'm not as smart as people might think.
Oh, let's pause on that. Why do you say that?
Well, I think what we've been able to build at OhmConnect is really driven by my team members,
Mm,
and it's funny because I get a lot of like I'm here what it takes. I think my team, who's done a lot more than me, could also be here,
mm,
and it's just been sitting on the shoulders of giants is great, but I want
mm,
people to recognize that I am sitting on shoulders of giants.
mm, mhm. Success is.
Changing the world.
If I could have done one thing differently, I would have.
Probably not gone to Stanford and started investing in this company a lot earlier.
Nice. If the world knew me for one thing, it would be.
Hopefully it will be creating a pathway to 100% clean energy.
Mm, I hope so too. I'm most proud of.
The kids growing up in this crazy world of pretty much all COVID, and facing it with a big smile and masking up without any issues.
Hmm. You sent me the most adorable video of your kids running on top of the bubble foam that our mic was the mic you're holding now. We sent to you, and it was wrapped in some bubble wrap, and you put it on the floor, and your kids were running, doing circles in the house on the bubble foam. And you sent me the video, and it was one of the cutest things I've ever seen. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, no, thank you. First of all, you created about 30 minutes of absolute fun for them. They were just laughing the entire time. So,
Hmm.
it's been great to see them really grow up. And when I was traveling pre-COVID, I was in Texas almost every month, and you don't realize how much you're missing. You kind of come back,
Hmm.
you're like, oh, they've really grown up. But being able to
Hmm.
see it every day is
Hmm.
really fun. And
Hmm.
it's something hopefully that our world can get around. And like there's a lot of in person. I think in person is vital in many, many
Yeah.
different situations. We over index on that right now.
Mm-hmm. Last sentence to complete for me is to build a successful startup. What it takes is.
Dedication, mission, clear vision on where you want to go. Um, and I want to thank big thanks to Kurt and Kadir. Um, that's they, along with Van, of course, this is my support network. They were laser focused, and their families were laser focused into a place where was kind of the great wide unknown of $1 trillion industry. So, having those core mission behind us really overcame a lot of challenges.
Really, really well said. And just so grateful to know you and to have them connect in the world doing what you're doing. And so grateful for you sharing your story with us on what it takes.
Well, and thank you, Emily, what you've built at Powerhouse between the venture, between the podcast, as well as kind of the company building that you've done, enables companies like us. We couldn't have done without you.
Oh, it means a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is officially the close of this interview, but we have a few minutes, and I love asking what is there anything you wish we would have talked about? Is there anything you wish I would have asked, or what else do you want people to know that we didn't get to?
I think the information piece is a very timely one. It is interesting that when I started OhmConnect, I thought you look at data and there's only one way to see it.
Hmm.
And over the past 4 years, especially with kind of the previous administration, you can see data in multiple angles.
Hmm.
And those angles aren't necessarily incorrect. They're just different. And having the empathy to see it from the other person's point of view is really important. So instead of pointing fingers and saying, you're wrong, I'm right, come around the side and saying, oh, I see what you're looking at now. And here, come look at my side of the equation too, is the only way we can mend this country.
Yeah, well said. How, well, let me actually defer to you on, yeah, other stuff you want to cover, things you want to dig into that we didn't as much as you would have liked to.
I think on the CEO front, just Cisco brought a tremendous value of his experience in the financial sector
Mm-hmm.
and viewing the world in a different light. We were using venture capital to grow our business,
Mm-hmm.
to basically plow it into marketing, and that's a very inefficient use of capital.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said, let's put that all aside and basically make it project finance. And those types of kind of massive mind shifts is absolutely necessary in energy. The technologies are all there.
Mm-hmm.
It's changing our mindset on what is a valued asset.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Yeah, I was so happy to see him join your team, and yeah, I haven't seen him in a long time, but I couldn't be happier that he's there.
And he sends his regards. He was super happy to
Oh,
see that you're on this.
awesome. Yeah. Anything else in the last few minutes, Matt, that you want to leave folks with?
No, get to know Emily. She's got a very powerhouse full. I love
Right
what
back
you're
at
doing
you.
here,
Thank you.
and everything that's been built, and bringing awareness to the entire kind of clean energy revolution. It's hopefully a very timely place to be right now, but kind of we need everyone to be behind this, not just the energy folks. It is affecting everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for everyone listening, if you're not yet signed up with OhmConnect, you should, because you make money by saving energy. So what could be better or easier? It's pretty amazing platform.
Thanks, Emily.
You're welcome. Thank you all for joining us. Looking forward to seeing you at our next episode. And Matt, thanks again. See you soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.